In a new piece in the New York Times from television critic Mike Hale, it's called Three Tough Guys Sign Off Is It a Moment? And the article dives into three popular dramas, Bosch, Mr. In Between, and Jack Irish, all coming to an end seemingly at the same time. So joining us now is that New York Times television critic Mike Hale. Mike, good to have you here on Cheddar News. So let's talk about those three shows in particular, because you write something really interesting in this. You say they're all dependably good and they're noticeably old-fashioned, but they all reach the end of the hard-boiled road. So do you think this is an end of an era when it comes to the all-white male anti-hero?
Well, first, Baker, thanks very much for having me on. No, you're not going to get me to say that. I don't think it's the end of anything. For one thing, there's just too much TV now. You know, I can point over here to something that's happening, and you can immediately point the other direction and show just the opposite thing happening. But, you know, I think it might be the sign of a change in the balance of things. Things might be moving in some other directions where we won't automatically see certain kinds of shows popping up season after season the way they have for, you know, the last X number of years.
Okay, so let's. The one thing that also stood out to me is you basically say all three of these shows were a disparate example of their genre. Explain kind of what you meant by that. Do you almost see like a change coming because of that?
Well, all I meant by that was that, you know, the genre of whatever you want to call it, hard-boiled or neo-noir crime shows is a very broad tent, and you can have all sorts of different shows that fit that rubric. You know, Mr. In Between was a show about a criminal. It focused on the bad guy, although of course he had a lot of attractive qualities. Bosch was a show that focused on the cop and was very much a kind of pro law enforcement show. It didn't romanticize it exactly, but you know, it was a solid kind of cop show. So that was the point I was trying to make, that these weren't the same kind of show. But they were each very good at what they did, and the thing that tied them together was this idea of the man, and it's, you know, traditionally always been a man of a certain age who lives by a code, and that was really the thing these three shows had in common. The code that drove the guy to make the hard choices he did, et cetera, et cetera. And what one point I made in that piece was that this kind of show isn't going to go anywhere. You're still going to see this kind of show, but you may start to see it in different forms and with different people filling that role. And I cited in the piece, I think, three shows that are very much in this genre, but with women as the central characters. There was one recently called Jet that starred Carla Gugino. There was another one with Rosario Dawson. And there was a third show with Abigail Spencer. Each of these was within that same kind of what we used to call tough guy genre, but they were tough women. So, you know, that was the kind of point I was trying to make, is if you're a network executive or a streaming company executive, and you're looking at, you know, hundreds of shows being pitched to you, and you're making those decisions about which ones to spend money on, you know, you may be starting to make different decisions now.
That's interesting. And it's interesting because we also look at the evolution of the comedy category. I mean, we went from, you know, the David Brent, Michael Scott, to now we're obsessed with Ted Lasso. We wanted something that made us like super happy. Do you almost kind of see this same sort of evolution happening in the drama category as well? You still kind of have these serialized cop shows, but who is basically the person that's front and center is the thing that's kind of evolving here.
Yeah, I don't know if I see that exactly changing now, but definitely in terms of what gets the attention and sort of what, you know, hits the zeitgeist now. I think there has been a move in recent years away from a kind of cop show or other kind of violent genre show. Not that those aren't still being made; they're coming out every day. But if you look at what's getting the attention now, it might be something more like The Crown, say, or Queen's Gambit, for instance. Very different sorts of shows, more kind of a human drama. I sort of see the Queen's Gambit in a way as like the drama kind of correspondence to Ted Lasso. You know, people are looking for something a little more positive, maybe a little more heartwarming. I'm not saying that's better or worse. It's just, I think, different in terms of what people are looking for these days.
And that's interesting. So do you always feel like there will be a market for shows like this, for almost like these sort of cop serialized dramas? Because I think of a lot of times like The Shield, all these other ones also. Do you think that there's still going to be an audience for them regardless of basically who's in them?
I think there will always be an audience, yeah, for this kind of drama. And I think that the maybe the energy that for a long time went into a kind of cop show detective genre, sort of loosely what we used to call noir, is now going into science fiction. That we're flooded with superhero shows, with various kinds of science fiction and fantasy shows. And you're seeing the same, I think, kind of changes in those shows that I'm talking about when you look at something like Lovecraft Country or something like Watchmen. You're seeing those genres also starting to undergo a change in the people who are cast in them and the people who are represented in them and in the kinds of stories that are being told in those genres.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point right there. New York Times television critic Mike Hale, good to have you here, Mike. Good stuff as always.